I locked the toilet door and scratched frantically. My entire body itched. I couldn't stop. Someone knocked on the door and a waitress asked if I was okay. My boyfriend worried as I'd spent an hour in the toilet already. What? What hour? Oh my, what will he think of me now? Hi, I'm Alana. Today is exactly 1 year Archie and I are dating. We are the same group at college and can't wait to graduate to get married. And after the lessons we walk, go to cafes and other romantic places. Suddenly the principal entered and introduced a new student, Blank. The newbie passed me and I smelled some amazing perfume. What a scent! After the lesson I went to say hi to Blank. It turned out his family had moved from Los Angeles. Wow, that is so amazing! Our town is so small, you'll be bored here. Blank stared at me and said, "Not at all. There are so many beauties around here." I blushed and got lost. Suddenly someone grabbed my hand and dragged me away. "Archie, what are you doing? My hand hurts and itches now. Your jealousy is for nothing." The next day I couldn't recognize my class. Everyone crowded the newbie and he was telling something. I heard of the perfume and squeezed closer. It turned out the perfume was brought from the United Arab Emirates and the collection was limited. Wow, how interesting! I wanted to ask him to sell me the opened bottle, but then the principal entered and announced the student president elections. He said he recommended Blank to participate. Everyone cheered and started applauding, and I joined them at first, but then I noticed Archie's furious look. He asked to speak and started blaming me for talking to the newbie and supporting the principal's idea. Archie started shouting and was mad. I'd never seen him like this before. "Calm down, what's it? Look what you've done to me. I'm itching nervously. If you run for president, surely I'll vote for you." The voting was scheduled for the weekend, and I wanted to arrive first. Archie would be glad. Suddenly I saw Blank near the entrance. What beautiful eyes he has! Why haven't I mentioned before? One moment he came really close and said he was envious, as Archie had the most beautiful girl in the college. I blushed and felt embarrassed, but in a blink my leg itched awfully. That's all nerves. I must leave. In the polling booth, I thought of Blank's words. They were nice, but I couldn't betray Archie after all. No, it's just an obsession, a test for our love to pass. I put a tick in the form and understood with a jolt that I voted for Blank. How horrible! But well, no one will ever learn the truth. I left the booth and ran into Archie. He looked at the form. Oh no! I tried to hide it behind my back, but it was too late. He saw everything. Archie said it was the day our relationship ended and he left. I stood in shock, not knowing what to do. Then my hand felt like stabbed with needles. This nervous itch again. I went home and tried to calm down, even drank some herbal tea, and it worked. The itching stopped. I got a text. I read it and I couldn't believe my eyes. Blank wrote he knew about my breakup with Archie and didn't want to waste a minute, so he'd booked a table in a restaurant and was waiting for me there. I definitely won't grieve, and I won't be alone. Archie was just getting on my nerves and even caused this mange. And Blank is so nice, calm and confident. In an hour we already chatted. We had so much in common. And then Blank actually managed to ask about Archie. I was consumed by memories and I felt my entire body started to itch. I shifted in my chair to scratch a little. Blank noticed that and asked if everything was fine. "Sorry, I need to go to the bathroom." I locked the toilet door and scratched frantically. My entire body itched. I couldn't stop. Someone knocked on the door and a waitress asked if I was okay. My boyfriend worried as I'd spent an hour in the toilet already. What? What hour? Oh my, what will he think of me now? I escaped the toilet, shouted to Blank I had urgent matters, and ran away. I had no time to think about it at home and called a doctor. This itching was about to drive me mad. And while I was waiting, I called Archie. What a jerk are you? You've ruined my nerves with your jealousy, and now I'm scratching all the time. I don't want to see you again. The doctor said I had a bad allergy. He gave me an injection and I immediately felt better. I was lying happy that nothing itched when Blank called. He asked me what had happened, and I had to tell him the truth. Suddenly he started to get into all the details. When has the itch started first? How long did it last? And so on. How strange. Blank, why are you so worried? This question seemed to stupefy him. After a pause, he said he liked me so much and therefore was very worried. Oh, how sweet! That's okay, I'll need only a couple of days at home to patch up, and then we'll meet again. I returned to college and rushed to my class, but Blank wasn't there. It turned out he left the college due to some family matters. How so? What the... I went out to call him, but his phone was switched off. Suddenly I saw Archie. Get lost! I don't want to see you, or I'll have a relapse of allergy. Archie looked at me sadly and said the itching wasn't caused by him, but by Blank's perfume, or to be precise, by the pheromones in it. What? Then I heard this. The day we broke up, Archie was following me, unable to believe there was something between me and Blank. When I'd left the restaurant, he entered and took the table next to Blank. Blank sat there for an hour, filling some papers in, and then called and asked me about the mange. Right after that, he called someone else and reported one test subject showed a side effect, an itch starting from one body part and enhancing if the contact with pheromones continued. And all other test subjects didn't show this. What nonsense are you saying? You're just mad about the breakup. What a fantasist! But then Archie took his phone and played the recorded conversation. It was all confirmed. My heart hurt and my throat clenched. Was I no more than a laboratory rabbit? And this obsession with Blank was caused by the pheromones? Archie, please forgive me. I've sinned so much against you. Do you remember how much we loved each other? Let's start it all over. Archie looked at me, shook his head and said, I'd do this gladly, but nothing can be returned. Did you like the video? We wait for your likes and comments. They inspire us and help the channel grow. Have a great one!
I stood on the bridge and asked passers-by for money, telling everyone that I had cockroaches under my skin and that I urgently needed treatment. Passers-by were easily sold on my fake blisters, but suddenly a strange woman in a dark raincoat grabbed my arm. I was pathetically making a learned speech about blisters, but she picked one off with her fingernail and glared at me. I tried to pull away, but she grabbed my arm with her claws and said with a hoarse voice that I was a liar and I would be damned. She blew some powder into my face from the palm of her hand, and when I rubbed my eyes, she was nowhere to be found. The next morning, I woke up with an itch on my neck. I began to scratch it, and suddenly, it seemed to me that something crawled under the skin. But I immediately dismissed these thoughts. I probably got too used to the role. I used to work as an actress in the theater, but it brought a penny. But I figured out how to use my acting talent, and now I was a top-notch con artist. Even though my mother always taught me to be honest, it made me angry. She was sick, and we couldn't even afford the doctor. I tried to save her, but in the end, she died right in my arms. The doctors only tried to get more money. They didn't care. At that moment, I was completely disappointed in people. Our house was taken away for debt, and after that, I decided that from this day on, I would treat people the same way they treated me and my mother. I would deceive them, and soon I would take all their dishonest money, which they loved so much. This would be my revenge for my mother's death. Thinking about it, I quickly packed up and headed for the hospital. There were always a lot of compassionate relatives, and I could always collect a good jackpot from it. But I didn't even stand outside the hospital for 5 minutes. The body itched terribly, and there was a feeling that someone was crawling under the skin. Terrified, I ran into the hospital. Help me, there's something moving under my skin. Patients parted, and some nurse said that with such problems, I needed to pay for an appointment with a skin doctor. I immediately put the money on the reception desk. The look in her eyes said, "Where did a beggar get so much money?" The tests took half a day, but in the end, the doctor said I was fine. Are you kidding me? I immediately got up and left the office, slamming the door behind me. I could feel something crawling under my skin, like it was eating me from the inside out. I couldn't work anymore, so I went home. I was hoping that if I got some sleep, it would go away. But just as I lay on my back, it was like I was burned. I jumped up and looked in the mirror. My back was all red. What's going on? And suddenly I remembered yesterday's gloomy woman. What if she really put a curse on me? I ran to the bridge where I begged and searched for the witch for several hours without success. I wanted her to take it all back. When I was exhausted, I decided to take a break in a cafe, and as soon as I went in, I saw the same woman behind the counter. She sipped her coffee calmly. Well, I'm going to get you. I started to demand that she take back her curse, but the old woman coldly ordered me to sit down. I'm the hereditary witch Graham, and you've got yourself in trouble. In a week, the cockroaches under your skin will eat you, she said. What was I supposed to do now? Then the witch added that of course, she could help me, but in exchange, I had to do everything she said for 3 days. I was indignant. No way! But then I felt something move under the skin on my back again. I was so terrified. I had no choice but to agree. After that, a satisfied Graham stood up and told me to follow her. We came to the outskirts to her dilapidated house. I followed Graham cautiously, and she immediately grabbed my arm and dragged me into the basement. I tried to resist, but she pushed me into the darkness and slammed the door. I banged on it, and even tried to pretend that I was suffocating from claustrophobia. But Graham didn't fall for it. Suddenly, something rustled in the corner. I asked in horror, "Who's here?" A huge fat hand came out of the darkness. At that moment, Graham, through the door, told me to strangle this hand immediately. What? It's a living thing. Then Graham slightly remarked that I had promised her that I would do anything if I wanted to be cured. She paused, and I looked at the poor hand and held out my trembling hands. But at that moment, something moved on the floor and began to approach me. And I saw hordes of cockroaches. They began to crawl out of woodwork. I ran and started pounding on the door. I felt like they were really climbing up my legs. But at last, the door opened, and I, not understanding anything, flew out of this damned house and ran as fast as I could. I went home and tried to forget everything. Maybe it was just a bad dream. I tried to calm down, but at night, it seemed to me that cockroaches were crawling under my skin. I couldn't even close my eyes. It seemed I was starting to go crazy. Barely waiting for the morning, I crawled exhausted to Graham's house and began to knock on the door. Graham opened it, but as soon as she saw me on the threshold, she was about to slam the door. I got down on my knees and begged her to take the curse off me, and I even started crying. But Graham dryly ordered me to drop the act and said that she would give me another chance, but she demanded all my money for it. I was ready to do anything. I was bitter, but I took the phone and immediately transferred everything from my card to her and pulled out everything that was in my pockets. Graham smiled haughtily and told me to go to the cemetery at night and dig up a skeleton hand from the oldest grave. I wanted to ask how I could find the grave, but Graham slammed the door on me. It was getting dark and I was afraid to go to the cemetery, but I had to pull myself together. I need to break the curse or I'll just go crazy. The cemetery was dead silent. I carefully lit my way with a flashlight and moved along the path with a shovel. Suddenly, there was a loud crack. My heart sank and I hid behind some tombstone. These were steps. The sound was getting closer. With horror, I looked out and immediately exhaled. It was the watchman who was inspecting the territory. I waited until he was out of sight. Where was this ancient grave? The oppressive silence was unbearable. Just yesterday I was fooling people with ease and fun, and today I was without money, in a cemetery, and with cockroaches under my skin. Then I carefully looked at the tombstone behind which I was hiding. I turned on the flashlight and pointed it at the tombstone, and damn, the 17th century, the most ancient grave. I started digging it up. Suddenly, someone put a cold hand on my shoulder. I screamed and ran as fast as I could. I ran to the witch in the early morning. My skin itched even more, and I could hardly breathe. Graham saw that I came without the skeleton's hand and said in disappointment, "One day left. You won't make it. The cockroaches will eat you." and then it just poured out. I can't remember the last time I cried like that. But the witch told me not to scream. She gave me one last chance. I needed to take the pendant from one evil witch, Terry, who had the audacity to rob Graham. There was no choice. I didn't even ask anything. The cockroaches were just crawling under my skin. Where to go? I asked. At least the witch Terry lived nearby, and I went straight to her house. I carefully walked over to the partially open window and peered inside. That old Terry was snoring on the bed, surrounded by a lot of cats. God, how fat and disgusting she was. Graham said the pendant was hidden in the dressing room next to her bedroom. My heart was pounding. The main thing was not to get caught. I carefully climbed through the window into the bedroom. As I went down, the floor creaked treacherously, and then Terry stared in her bed. Was she awake? But no, Terry just turned over on the other side. I walked around a couple of cats and crept into the dressing room, where there were a lot of boxes and chests. Where was the pendant? I began quietly rummaging through the witch's junk. I finally found it, hanging on the altar by the mirror. The pendant was made of pure gold and shaped like a skull with huge diamonds in its eyes. I put it in my pocket. Got it. I was about to leave the dressing room when I heard the cat's loud scream. I stepped on the tail of one of them. I immediately ran down to the hall to the front door. I had my hand on the handle. But then the old woman screamed, and she pushed me, and I hit my forehead right on the door with all my strength, and then everything was a blur. I woke up because the policeman was patting my cheeks. I looked around, and Terry was standing there, looking sullen and disheveled. I immediately backed away from her, begged her not to cast a spell on me, and told her about Graham's curse. The cops looked at me like I was a psychopath, and Terry said I was a liar, and that Graham, her sister, con artist, had just dispatched me. She was wanted, and it was not the first time she tried to steal this pendant, because it was very expensive and was inherited by Terry from their grandmother. Terry asked the cops to take me to the station as Graham's accomplice. I swore I didn't know anything, but the cops grabbed me away and took me away. I sat in the cell and grieved. So Graham wasn't a witch, and I, a first-class fraudster, was a victim of a scam myself. I almost cried. Was I really going to jail? And the cockroaches did not go anywhere. The whole body itched terribly. Suddenly, Graham was brought into the cell in handcuffs. The guard wanted to slam the door, but Graham snapped her fingers in his face. His eyes glared over, and he obediently removed the handcuffs first from Graham and then from me, and just turned his face to the wall. Graham was about to make a dash for the exit, but I caught her and pinned her against the bars. You're not going anywhere until you tell me how to get the cockroaches out from under my skin. Then Graham laughed. She just wanted to teach a cheeky young con artist like me a lesson, and there were no cockroaches. It was just an allergy to the powder she blew in my face, and the usual allergy pills would quickly remove the itch. So I was not sick. I was about to tear Graham apart on the spot, but then I heard voices. The police were approaching. Graham tugged at my sleeve and dragged me out of the station. Graham and I ran out and disappeared, and when we stopped, I asked why the guard had let us go. She said she was a hypnotist, and it worked with the guard. Then Graham said that she liked me and offered to run away from the city to cheat with her. We would make a lot of money together and we would live like queens. Graham offered everything I'd wanted for so long, but then, seeing her hands scratched till they bled, I remember how I had lived in fear these days. An image of my mom popped into my head. She wanted me to be a happy and honest person, and this was what the fraud led to me. I turned and left without answering Graham. I had a new life ahead of me, though not an easy one, but an honest one. Right, Mom? Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.